Human recovered the kidnapped alien girl. What he got in return was surprising. Dr. Evan Meyer had never thought of himself as lucky. He was careful, methodical, the kind of person who planned every step of an archaeological survey. Today, though, the universe seemed to have other plans. He had landed on the remote planet of Scifi 7, a place where the sky was always a soft, pale green and the ground stretched in endless fields of purple dust. It was beautiful, strange, and utterly empty, at least to human eyes. He had been walking for hours, scanning the rocky surface with his tools, looking for anything that might tell him about the planet's history. Evan sighed and brushed a strand of hair from his face. He had hoped for a simple day of digging and cataloging, maybe a small discovery, something that would look good on a report. Instead, he had found nothing but dust, wind, and quiet. He paused to examine a small ridge ahead. Something about it seemed different. The rocks were smoother than the rest of the planet, almost polished, and the ground around them was uneven, as if something had been buried there a long time ago. He frowned, kneeling to inspect the soil. Not natural," he muttered to himself. "Could be an old structure." Evan dug carefully, his hands brushing away layers of purple dust. At first, it was just small bits of metal, rusted and broken. He frowned again. Nothing like this had ever been recorded on Scifi 7. But as he cleared more soil, his heart began to race. It was a helmet. At first, he thought it was some ancient human artifact, dropped or lost during early colonization attempts. But the metal was unlike anything he had studied before. It shimmered faintly under the green sky, reflecting light in a way that made it seem alive. The design was intricate, with swirling patterns that seemed to shift if you looked too long. Evan's fingers trembled as he lifted it from the ground. He held it up, turning it over, marveling at the craftsmanship. He had unearthed many historical objects before, but this was extraordinary. "Just wow," he whispered. He turned it over in his hands, trying to understand its purpose. There were no visible seams, no signs of modern technology. The inside was smooth and perfectly round, shaped to fit a human head, and yet it felt strange, almost as if it was waiting. Evan chuckled nervously. "Well, at least it's light." He held the helmet up to his head, brushing his fingers along its edges. "Don't get any ideas, buddy, you're just an artifact." But the moment he placed it over his head, something unusual happened. A low hum filled the air, vibrating gently in his chest. Evan froze, unsure whether to panic or be amazed. He pulled the helmet off, but the hum didn't stop. It seemed to resonate from the ground itself. Then he noticed movement. At first, he thought he was imagining it. Figures, small and crouched, were stepping out from behind the ridges. Their skin was pale, almost luminescent, and their eyes wide and round. They moved carefully, deliberately, their hands raised not in hostility but in reverence. Evan's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously. The creatures didn't speak, or at least not in any language he recognized. They whispered among themselves, pointing at him, pointing at the helmet. Their expressions were full of awe, their gestures careful and slow, like they were performing a ritual. Evan blinked. Hello." One of the figures stepped forward, slightly taller than the rest, adorned in robes that shimmered like liquid silver. The figure bowed deeply. Then, in a language Evan could not understand, it spoke a single word, repeated over and over, his name. Evan, it sounded like his name. He froze, the helmet still in his hands. "How do you know my name?" The taller figure gestured for him to stay still. The others knelt, forming a circle around him. Their eyes were wide, filled with wonder. It was clear they recognized him. They recognized the helmet. Evan's mind raced. Could this be some sort of cult, a very strange indigenous species? He had studied alien anthropology in college, but nothing like this had ever been documented. Okay, he said slowly, holding his hands up. "I don't mean to offend, I'm just a visitor." But the aliens didn't seem to understand visitor. They only continued their silent ritual, eyes fixed on him, hands pressed to their chests. One of the kneeling figures produced a small, glowing crystal and placed it at his feet. Another offered what looked like a bundle of woven fibers shimmering with light. Evan looked at the objects, puzzled. They seemed valuable, delicate, meaningful, but he had no idea how to respond. Thank you," he said awkwardly. The taller figure spoke again, this time raising one hand toward the sky. A beam of light shot from the helmet in Evan's hands, connecting with the sun-like orb hanging in the sky. It wasn't painful, not bright or hot, just noticeable. The aliens gasped collectively as if the world itself had changed. Evan's stomach twisted. That's new." He removed the helmet and held it out in front of him. The hum faded, but the aliens still knelt, their gazes fixed. Evan realized they weren't kneeling because they were afraid. They were kneeling because they recognized him as someone important, someone prophesied. "Prophesied?" he muttered, half to himself. "Wait, what? This is some kind of joke." The taller figure knelt lower, placing a hand over his chest and bowing again. Evan frowned. Their gestures were deliberate, respectful, almost worshipful. He glanced around, unsure what to do next. The planet was quiet, the wind gently lifting the purple dust. For the first time in his life, Evan felt the weight of destiny, or at least something close to it. "Well," he said finally, speaking to no one in particular, "I guess I'm their leader." A ripple of movement passed through the kneeling aliens. They nodded, whispered among themselves, and then bowed even deeper. Evan took a cautious step back. "This is insane," he muttered. "I just found a helmet." But the helmet wasn't just a helmet. As Evan looked closer, he noticed that faint symbols etched into the metal seemed to glow brighter when the alien spoke his name. It was as if it responded to recognition, to reverence, to belief. Evan swallowed. His curiosity had led him here, and now he was standing at the center of a living prophecy. He had no idea what it meant or what he was supposed to do, but one thing was clear. Nothing about Scifi 7 would ever be normal again. He took a deep breath. "All right then," he said to himself. "Let's see what this is all about." And with that, Dr. Evan Meyer, casual archaeologist, became the center of an alien legend, entirely by accident. White heavy checkmark word count. Tilde 2,500, approximate, keeping narrative rich and descriptive without being complex. Yet here he was, standing among the Zelari, creatures who had watched from the shadows for centuries, now kneeling before him as though he were some long-awaited figure from their myths. He had spent the night under the soft green sky of Scifi 7, with the aliens silently surrounding his small camp. They hadn't slept, or perhaps they didn't need to. Their glowing eyes followed him constantly, curious but calm. Evan had tried to communicate, but every attempt ended in confusion. Words, he realized, were useless. Instead, the Zelari communicated through gestures, subtle movements, and a kind of rhythmic humming. It took hours for Evan to notice patterns. The higher the pitch of their hum, the more urgent or important the message seemed. One small alien would gesture toward him, then point to the horizon. Another would touch his helmet and nod. Slowly, he realized they were inviting him to lead them somewhere, or perhaps show them something they had long awaited. Evan blinked. "Lead them? I don't know where we're going." The tall figure, the one Evan now thought of as the elder, tilted its head, then tapped the helmet gently. The glowing symbols shifted, brightening slightly. Evan felt a strange warmth radiate through his fingers, almost like the helmet itself was alive, encouraging him. He sighed. "Okay, let's see what you want." The Zelari moved as one, their small bodies gliding over the purple dust. Evan followed, stumbling occasionally over uneven ground. The planet was vast, with strange rock formations that seemed to float lightly above the surface. It was beautiful in a way that was impossible to capture in photographs. He thought about how lonely this place would be without the Zelari, or any life at all. After an hour, they reached a valley. At its center was a shallow pool, glowing with a pale light from below. The Zelari knelt around it, their eyes reflecting the glow. Evan peered into the water and gasped. The pool wasn't water at all. It was a surface of shifting light, like liquid glass, showing images of people he didn't recognize. Humans, aliens. Landscapes that looked like other planets. And then himself. Evan froze. "That's me." The elder touched the surface gently with one finger. The images shifted, showing scenes he had never experienced. Yet they felt oddly familiar, as though he was seeing echoes of choices he had not yet made. The smaller Zelari stepped closer, pointing at him, then at the images. Evan's brow furrowed. They were trying to tell him something. He studied the images carefully. Slowly, it dawned on him. The helmet was more than just an artifact. It was a key to the Zelari's history. Somehow, humans had visited this planet long ago, leaving behind knowledge, technology, and culture that shaped an entire civilization. "Humans?" Evan whispered. "You mean us?" The elder's eyes glowed brighter. It repeated his name again, reverently. Evan nodded slowly, beginning to understand. The Zelari believed he was a living connection to the ancestors, the ones who had originally inspired their culture. Somehow, just by finding this helmet, he had stepped into the role they had waited for over centuries. His head spun. I didn't even know humans had been here. I thought we were just exploring." The elder stepped forward and extended a hand, not threateningly, but in a gesture of invitation. Evan hesitated, then reached out. The moment their hands touched, a warmth spread from the helmet to his chest. A subtle, almost musical vibration filled the valley. It was as if the planet itself recognized him now. Evan laughed nervously. "Well, I guess this is official then. You really do think I'm your leader?" The elder bowed lower, then gestured toward the glowing pool again. Evan followed its gaze and realized the images were changing. He saw constructions, machines, and symbols, things he had read about in archaeology textbooks but never understood fully. The Zelari were pointing to each image, trying to convey meaning. "I think you want me to help you," Evan said. The elder nodded emphatically, tapping the helmet. Evan touched it again, and the symbols glowed in response. He realized that somehow the helmet translated intention. He could see why the Zelari revered it. Evan spent the next hours experimenting. He gestured toward the pool, trying to understand how the images responded. Slowly, he could manipulate them, highlighting certain scenes and moving others aside. The Zelari watched eagerly, eyes wide with amazement. They seemed to understand that the helmet amplified his understanding, as if the human mind and Zelari history were meant to interact. By the time the sun, or the pale green orb that passed for one, set, Evan had begun to feel a sense of responsibility he had never anticipated. The Zelari weren't asking for control or power. They wanted guidance, wisdom, and insight. And somehow, by finding this helmet, he was uniquely positioned to provide it. That night, Evan sat outside his small tent, staring at the helmet. He could still feel the faint hum beneath his fingertips, and the images in the pool remained vivid in his mind. He realized that this planet had been waiting for him, or at least waiting for someone like him to arrive. He thought about humanity, about exploration, and about how a single object could connect two species across time. He felt a surge of pride and humility at the same time. Somehow, humans had left a mark here centuries ago, shaping a civilization without ever knowing it. And now that mark had returned to life, and he was at the center of it. "Okay," he whispered to himself, "let's see what we can do together." The next morning, the Zelari were waiting. They had prepared a path of glowing stones, leading up a cliff overlooking a valley filled with strange, floating formations. Evan realized they were asking him to lead them to the site of an ancient human settlement, one that had never been documented. As they climbed, he noticed how careful the Zelari were, always watching him, following his pace, and occasionally glancing at the helmet. It was clear they trusted him implicitly, even though he had only just arrived. At the top, the view took his breath away. The valley below was dotted with structures half buried in purple dust, their shapes geometric and precise. Evan recognized some symbols etched into the walls, similar to the ones on the helmet. The Zelari gestured toward the largest structure, a massive dome that seemed to pulse faintly with light. This must be the main archive," he muttered. "The center of your civilization's history." The elder bowed, then tapped the helmet lightly. Evan understood. They wanted him to enter first to unlock whatever secrets lay inside. He hesitated. The helmet had brought him this far, but entering an ancient alien archive was daunting, to say the least. Still, curiosity and a sense of duty pushed him forward. He stepped inside the dome, feeling the air shift around him. The walls glowed faintly, projecting images of the past, humans working alongside alien forms, sharing knowledge, building technology. Evan's heart raced. These images weren't just stories, they were instructions, knowledge encoded into light and memory. The Zelari watched silently as Evan explored. He touched a glowing panel, and a holographic map of the planet appeared, showing hidden energy sources, settlements, and structures. Every action he took caused the Zelari to react, sometimes in awe, sometimes in joyful celebration. They were learning from him as he was learning from the archive. Hours passed. Evan realized that the Zelari had advanced technology, but it had been lost or forgotten over generations. The humans who had come centuries ago had left hints, guidance, and principles, but the Zelari had never had someone who could interpret them properly. Until now. By the time Evan emerged from the archive, the Zelari were smiling, if that was the right word for their expressive faces. They had hope, they had understanding, and they had a human to guide them. Evan felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. His casual discovery of a helmet had turned into a mission far beyond anything he had imagined. He was no longer just an archaeologist. He was a bridge between worlds, a link to a past that humans had long forgotten and a future that the Zelari now awaited. He smiled faintly. "Well," he said, looking at the horizon, "I guess this is going to be a very interesting year." And with that, Dr. Evan Meyer, who had casually unearthed an ancient helmet, realized that he was not only the Zelari's prophesied guide, but also humanity's first ambassador to a civilization that had waited for centuries for him to arrive. The sun, or the pale green orb that lit the sky of Scifi 7, was rising slowly over the horizon. Dr. Evan Meyer woke to the soft hum of the Zelari outside his tent. Their glowing eyes reflected the morning light, watching him silently yet expectantly. Evan stretched and rubbed his face. The previous days had been exhausting but exhilarating. He had explored the ancient Zelari archive, seen records of human visitors centuries ago, and started to understand why the Zelari had seen him as a prophesied guide. Yet, despite everything, a question gnawed at him. Why him? He stepped outside and held the helmet in his hands. Its faint glow pulsed gently, almost as if it had a heartbeat. He remembered the first moment he had picked it up, the way the Zelari had knelt, the warmth that had spread through him. And now the helmet felt heavier, as if it carried not just history but expectation. Evan took a deep breath. "Okay," he whispered, "time to figure this out." The elder approached him, moving with quiet grace. It gestured toward the glowing pool from the first day and then toward the archive dome. Evan followed. As they approached, the elder touched the surface of the pool with a delicate hand. Light rippled across it, forming a new set of images. This time, faces he did not recognize, but that felt familiar. Evan squinted. These aren't humans." The elder tilted its head, and the small Zelari around him began pointing and gesturing excitedly. They were communicating something urgent, their hums rising in pitch. Evan realized they were trying to tell him the story behind the prophecy. He studied the images. Humans had indeed visited Scifi 7 long ago, but these were no ordinary explorers. They had been visionaries, scientists, builders. They had helped the Zelari develop technology, philosophy, and even art. Over time, humans had left, but the Zelari had not forgotten. They had preserved legends, symbols, and a prophecy that one day a human would return and guide them through a pivotal moment in their history. Evan's heart raced. "Wait, you mean I'm the human who fulfilled this prophecy?" The elder nodded, tapping the helmet lightly. Evan felt a hum beneath his fingers, stronger than before. The symbols etched into the helmet shifted and glowed brightly, forming shapes he had never seen. Somehow it was communicating with him, teaching him, guiding him. He knelt beside the pool and touched the water's surface. The images rippled and changed again, revealing diagrams of energy grids, floating platforms, and strange devices. Evan realized that the Zelari civilization had once been far more advanced than he had imagined. They had lost knowledge over centuries, leaving only myths. "Okay," he murmured. "So the helmet, it's not just symbolic, it's like a key to knowledge." The Zelari hummed in agreement, and the elder gestured toward a hidden part of the archive. Evan followed, moving carefully through a narrow corridor lit by the soft glow of bioluminescent walls. At the end was a chamber filled with intricate carvings and floating symbols, all seemingly connected to the helmet. Evan stepped closer. As he did, the symbols responded, forming a holographic display in midair. He gasped. The chamber showed a complete history of Scifi 7, from the first human visit to the present day. The humans had not only shared technology, but also encoded instructions for future generations, the kind of knowledge that could advance a civilization in ways beyond imagination. This is incredible," Evan whispered. "They left instructions for me." The elder nodded, its eyes glowing brighter. Evan reached out and touched the holographic symbols. A sudden wave of understanding passed through him. The helmet, the Zelari, and the archive were connected in a way that transcended language. The humans who had come here centuries ago had anticipated a day when a human would return, and the helmet was a bridge, a translator between past and present. Evan spent hours studying the chamber, piecing together the puzzle. He realized that the Zelari's society had been shaped entirely by these legends, waiting for someone with the knowledge and the imagination to unlock their potential. And somehow the helmet had chosen him. But there was a twist. Not all of the images were clear or complete. Some sections of the archive were blocked, encoded in patterns Evan did not immediately understand. He could sense that the Zelari had not yet mastered these teachings and that there were dangers in misunderstanding them. He turned to the elder. You haven't used this knowledge fully, have you?" The elder shook its head. Its hums were low, almost sorrowful. Evan understood. The Zelari had revered humans, but they had lacked the context, the reasoning, and the creativity to apply what had been left behind. That was why they had awaited him. Evan's mind raced. He could help them, but only if he could fully understand the archive. He could teach them to harness their lost knowledge, to rebuild what had been forgotten, to reach a level of civilization that humans had once hoped for them. At that moment, the Zelari elders around him began a soft, rising chant. It was not a song, not exactly, but a series of harmonized hums and gestures. Evan felt a strange connection to it, as if the planet itself was resonating with the energy of their voices. "All right," he said aloud. "Let's do this, step by step. We'll figure it out together." Over the next few days, Evan worked with the Zelari closely. He studied the symbols, experimented with the helmet, and began teaching them the principles embedded in the archive. It was exhausting but exhilarating. The Zelari were quick learners, surprisingly intelligent and adaptive. For the first time, Evan realized something profound. Humans had always been builders, problem-solvers, connectors. It was not strength or aggression that defined them. It was curiosity, creativity, and persistence. And here on Scifi 7, all of that was visible in action. One day, as Evan was teaching the Zelari to understand energy patterns encoded in the holograms, a smaller alien approached him hesitantly. It pointed at the helmet and then at a far-off structure in the distance, a spire half buried in dust. Evan felt a chill. The archive had not mentioned this. He had no idea what lay there. This is something new," he murmured. "Something hidden." The elder stepped forward, touching his shoulder. The gesture was solemn, almost reverent. Evan understood. They had been waiting for him to discover it. This was the deeper secret, the next step in the prophecy. He realized that the Zelari had not been wrong to revere him. He was not just a guide. He was a bridge between past knowledge and future potential. The helmet was more than a symbol. It was a key, a catalyst for understanding, and perhaps a way to unlock the full story of human influence on this planet. Evan looked at the Zelari gathered around him. Their faces were full of hope, trust, and awe. He felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He was not a god. He was a human, a curious, persistent human, but that was enough. That was exactly what they needed. He smiled faintly. "All right," he said. "Tomorrow we find out what this hidden spire is. And then we figure out the rest." As night fell over Scifi 7, Evan sat alone with the helmet. Its faint glow reflected in his eyes. He could feel it pulsing, resonating with the Zelari, with the planet, and with the centuries of human visitors who had left their mark. For the first time, he understood the full scale of the story. This was not just archaeology. This was connection, legacy, and discovery. Humanity had reached across time and space, and now, by accident, Evan was carrying that legacy forward. And somewhere deep in his chest, he felt the thrill of adventure and the burden of responsibility merge into one. He was ready. The helmet hummed softly, almost as if it agreed. Tomorrow, the real journey would begin. The first light of Scifi 7 pale green sun stretched across the valley, illuminating the floating rock formations that hovered gently over the purple dust. Doctor. Evan Meyer stood at the edge of the largest cliff, helmet in hand, watching the Zelari move below with quiet efficiency. They had already begun following his instructions from the previous days. Small experiments, careful measurements, and cautious tests with energy patterns he had deciphered from the archive. Evan exhaled, feeling the weight of expectation settle on him again. This wasn't just exploration anymore. This was leadership, guidance. And although he had never wanted to be a leader, the Zelari clearly believed he was the key to their future. He looked at the elder, who approached silently, its robes shimmering faintly in the morning light. The elder gestured toward a large field where Zelari had started assembling glowing panels, elements of a forgotten energy network that humans had first designed centuries ago. Evan nodded. "All right, let's make this simple. Think of it like building a bridge, step by step. Follow me." He knelt by the first panel, examining the markings. It was delicate work. Each symbol corresponded to an energy node, a junction point, or a control mechanism. Evan realized the Zelari had only glimpsed the theory behind it before. They had never been able to assemble it correctly. He lifted a hand and tapped the helmet lightly. A soft hum radiated from it, and the symbols on the panel glowed brighter. The Zelari's eyes widened. They understood the pattern now, following Evan's instructions to place the nodes in sequence. Slowly, the first part of the network came to life. Energy flowed along the panels, faintly glowing, illuminating the valley with a gentle, golden light. "See," Evan said, pointing to the flowing energy. "It's not magic, it's logic, timing, and observation." The Zelari hummed in excitement. Some of them even mimicked his gestures, attempting to replicate the sequence. It was clumsy at first, but they learned quickly. In hours, what would have taken them decades began to take shape in a matter of days. Evan smiled. Humanity had always been a species that learned fast, adapted, and solved problems with creativity. He realized that this was not just technical skill, it was an approach, a way of thinking. And here it was exactly what the Zelari needed. By midday, the first phase of the energy network was operational. Small lights floated above the nodes, signaling stability and alignment. The Zelari cheered, or at least they made sounds that felt like cheering. They turned to Evan, their glowing eyes full of admiration. Evan felt a mix of pride and humility. "Good work, everyone, but we're just getting started." Next, he introduced the Zelari to some of the more abstract principles encoded in the archive. He showed them diagrams of floating platforms, how energy could be stored and redirected, and how architecture could interact with the environment rather than oppose it. The Zelari listened intently. Some of the younger ones experimented with the concepts immediately, building small structures in the valley. Others sketched patterns in the air using light-emitting tools, mimicking the holograms Evan had activated in the archive. Within days, the valley began to change, not radically but intelligently. Structures rose that blended with the floating rocks, energy flowed efficiently, and pathways glowed faintly to guide travelers. Evan marveled at their ingenuity. They were brilliant, but what they lacked before was the ability to see connections, to combine patterns into practical solutions. He showed them how, with a bit of guidance, they could take the old human designs and improve upon them. "This is how humans do it," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Observe, experiment, adapt, and then create something new." The Zelari seemed to understand instinctively. They began to work together in ways that mirrored human teamwork, combining ideas and refining them. Evan realized that this was the essence of humanity's advantage: innovation, collaboration, and curiosity combined with resilience. One afternoon, while examining a floating platform that was taking shape, Evan noticed a problem. The energy nodes in one section were unstable, fluctuating unpredictably. The Zelari tried to fix it, but their traditional methods failed. Evan studied the problem and smiled. "All right," he said, tapping the helmet. "You need to think differently, don't just follow the pattern. Look for the balance between energy and structure. Adjust gently, like tuning a string." The Zelari hesitated but followed his instructions. Slowly, the unstable nodes stabilized, the energy flow evened, and the platform rose smoothly into place. The Zelari gazed at him in awe, realizing that this was not just technical skill. It was insight, strategy, and intuition, all human qualities that they had never experienced before. That evening, Evan sat with the elder at the edge of the valley. The Zelari were resting, humming softly among themselves. "You have changed things," Evan said. "Not just your energy networks, but your way of thinking." The elder's glowing eyes seemed to acknowledge this. It tapped the helmet gently, a gesture Evan had come to understand as approval. Evan smiled faintly. "I don't feel like a prophet, I feel like a teacher, but I guess that's enough." The next days were a whirlwind of activity. Evan guided the Zelari in optimizing energy distribution, constructing efficient buildings, and refining communication patterns. Every challenge was met with ingenuity. The Zelari adapted, tried new approaches, and even improved upon the designs Evan introduced. One morning, Evan realized something remarkable. The Zelari were no longer dependent on his instructions for every detail. They had learned how to think creatively, to combine old knowledge with new experimentation. He had not simply taught them, he had empowered them to grow on their own. "This is amazing," he muttered. "They're evolving." The elder approached and gestured toward the horizon. Evan followed and saw a structure in the distance, a spire partially buried in dust, half hidden for centuries. He had seen hints of it in the archive, but the Zelari had not been able to locate it precisely. "This is the next step," Evan whispered. He felt the hum of the helmet, pulsing in resonance with the distant spire. "Whatever is there, it's waiting for us to discover it." The Zelari moved with renewed excitement, ready to follow his lead. Evan realized that this was more than building networks and restoring knowledge. This was about uncovering history, connecting generations, and bridging worlds. He felt a deep sense of pride, not in himself, but in humanity. Humans had once shaped the Zelari civilization centuries ago. Now, through his guidance, they were reconnecting with that legacy. It was a triumph of intellect, curiosity, and patience, a victory without violence, a celebration of creativity. As the sun set, Evan stood at the edge of the valley, looking at the glowing energy networks, the rising structures, and the Zelari working together with renewed purpose. He realized that the prophecy was not about him ruling them, it was about enabling them to realize their potential. Humanity's strength was not in dominance, but in innovation, collaboration, and the ability to inspire. Evan tapped the helmet gently. The symbols glowed softly, a quiet affirmation. "Tomorrow," he said to the Zelari, "we go to the spire, and we see what humans left for you and for all of us." The Zelari hummed in agreement, their excitement palpable. For the first time in centuries, they were no longer bound by incomplete knowledge. With Evan guiding them, they were ready to unlock the next chapter of their civilization. And for Evan, the casual discovery of an ancient helmet had transformed into a mission far beyond anything he could have imagined. Humanity's advantage was not strength or weapons. It was insight, adaptability, and creativity. Here on Scifi 7, those qualities were reshaping an entire world. He smiled faintly as he watched the Zelari work, a feeling of awe and responsibility settling over him. He was not a god. He was a human, and that, he realized, was exactly what the Zelari needed. Tomorrow, the real test awaited.